Coming up, a unique take on Europe's economic problems.
So our job at Planet Money is to try to explain the economy to you in a way that's accessible, that's easy to understand, and that makes you care about it.
Zoe Chase and Caitlin Kenny from NPR's Planet Money podcast give a first-hand account of Germany's reaction to the Eurozone debt crisis. It's just ahead on Global Ethics Forum.
In case you guys have never heard of our show, it's called Planet Money, and it was a project started at NPR to cover the global economy. But the idea was to start a show for people who don't read the Wall Street Journal, who don't read the Financial Times. They're awesome publications. They do great reporting. We read them a lot, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people can't understand them. They tend to use a lot of jargon. They use terms people aren't familiar with, concepts you've never heard of before. So our job at Planet Money is to try to explain the economy to you in a way that's accessible, that's easy to understand, and that makes you care about it.
We're economics reporters, and that means we have to cover the European debt crisis. That's a very big economic story. The problem is, this crisis has been going on for 3 years. That's a very slow-moving crisis. When you think about a crisis, like an earthquake, it's like covering an earthquake like crack by crack. It's very hard to give it urgency if you've been saying it's about to break for 6 months, you know, and that's another challenge that we have.
We always have meetings where like, this week it's gonna explode, it's gonna go crazy.
Zero's over.
And then we get really excited. Did you see Italian bond rates today? And anybody outside of our team just sort of looks at us and is like, I don't understand why that matters, and I really don't care. So the way that we have to get people involved and make them care is to tell them the stories of the people. And that's what we're gonna do for you guys today, is sort of tell you the story of how a trip we took to Germany and how we tried to find the people in the country there to make you understand who they are, what they care about, what matters to them, to help you be able to put context and feeling behind this huge, you know, debt crisis situation.
And so our colleague Hannah Jaffe-Wald, she'd gone to Greece and she'd gone to Spain, and she brought us a lot of great stories about people in Greece and Spain. But we got curious last summer, as I think a lot of people were, like how it felt actually to be the hero. You know, everyone's eyes started to turn to Germany and say, okay, so like, you're the only one at the table that can pick up the check. Like, are you gonna pick up the check? You know, how does that feel to be the only person with money in the room, which is kind of Germany's situation in Europe. We fly in, we get there, and the first thing most reporters do when they fly in somewhere is they find a local journalist to kind of bring them up to speed and catch them up. And our very first question was, what do Germans care about? What do they really, really care about?
And this is the answer that we got.
Yeah.
There are two things in Germany, in German psyche, that are important: monetary stability and soccer.
So this is Klaus Frankenberger. He's an editor at the FAZ, which is a big paper in Germany. Obviously, we weren't there to do a story about soccer, sadly, but monetary stability, that's something we can talk about. And that term, when he's talking about that, what that means is that people in Germany are afraid that their money is going to lose value, that they're going to wake up tomorrow and the money in their bank account is going to be worth less than it was the day before. And they are
really worried about this.
The thing that scared them about this whole euro crisis is that the euro had been so strong and so stable, and now they saw all these countries around them going into debt, they saw all these problems, and they were afraid that this stability that they value, that they hold so dear, was gonna be in jeopardy. So we started off by thinking, where does this fear come from? Why are people afraid of inflation? Why are they afraid of their money losing value? And basically everyone we met on our trip, we asked them, is this something that you worry about?
You think this is the German angst to worry about in inflation. This is true even in the younger generation. Money should be worth something. This is a threat.
But has that ever happened to you?
No, to me, I'm very lucky that this didn't happen to me. But I think it's a part of the German thinking.
So this was just a random 25-year-old kid who was totally dressed up like a goth, like very kind of weird looking, sitting outside Dunkin' Donuts. And he's worried that his savings, which most 25-year-olds in America don't even have, might lose money. You know, it's very, very different. The reason why Germans, all Germans, are so worried about inflation has to do with a very specific period in its history. So after World War I, we remember who won and who lost that war. Germany had to pay a lot of money to France and to the other powers. And one of the ways that it dealt with the massive amount of debt that it had was it printed tons of money to pay off these debts, and the money became worthless. So people are running around with wheelbarrows full of money. This is a famous story, the story of the Weimar Republic. So I found this historian. He was kind of an older German gentleman. He spoke English perfectly. We walked around the Brandenburg Gate in the rain, and we talked about what it would have been like at that moment in Germany in 1923 when hyperinflation was out of control.
There's this famous example that somebody sits in a pub and orders a beer, and immediately when the waiter carries the beer to his table, he orders the second one, and the waiter says, "Well, you haven't finished." "Yes, but if I don't order now, prices will be doubled before I finish my first beer."
Yeah, I can actually speak to that in a probably unusual example, but I'm about 40% German. My grandfather emigrated from Germany to the United States, and his family ultimately left because his father owned a construction business, and he was trying to get an anniversary gift for his wife, and I think it took about 2 wheelbarrows full of money to buy it in the afternoon. Well, in the evening, when he went back to pick it up, it was going to cost 3. So he had to have his construction team take off of work for the afternoon and get the 3rd wheelbarrow and take it there. And it was at that moment that they kind of realized this isn't sustainable, we need to leave. And they left, and only 10 years later, his son, my grandfather, was fighting in the war.
Everyone we asked about inflation, is it something you worry about? Yes, absolutely. We had this great translator while we were there, Joyti. She said, "You should talk to my former neighbor, Mario. He's really concerned about the crisis." And so I was at his house. He's a very sweet man. We're having tea. And I said, "You know, you're worried about inflation. What makes you think about it?" And he said, "I have this stamp collection." So I said, can you take it out? Can you show me? So he takes out this book of stamps.
Ja, 20 Milliarden, 20 Millionen.
And basically, he's showing me as hyperinflation, as it was going on, and things were becoming worthless every day, the stamps go up in value, 20 million, 20 billion. Then they get to the point where things were changing so rapidly, they couldn't print things fast enough, so they literally rubber stamped new amounts over the old stamp. So we're sitting here, we're looking at the book, and he's sort of emotional talking about it, looking back into history. And we get to this one section of the book where there's a new set of stamps, and I asked him what was going on in his mind when he was looking at them. What do you think when you look at these? Oh, yes. What did you say that again?
Help. Ich möchte, dass das,
I don't want this to happen again, because it would mean he is coming.
He being, of course, Hitler.
Those were the next stamps in his collection.
Those were the next stamps in his books. And, it's a contested issue among historians, among economists, whether hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic did eventually lead to Hitler taking power. But the fact of the matter is, in most Germans' minds, those two things are associated. They not only are afraid that when they wake up tomorrow, their bank account is going to be worth less, but they're worried that that type of monetary instability, political instability, could lead to someone like that taking power. And that scares them. And that really helps to understand why they have this perpetual fear of inflation.
These stories are crazy. They seem like fairy tales, but they actually have real financial implications. One of the places, actually basically the place that's sort of in charge of this rescue effort is the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank was sort of designed in the German image. It was supposed to really be a lot like the German Central Bank that it was replacing, and it's right there in Frankfurt. And central bankers, I don't know if you guys have read a lot of interviews with Ben Bernanke or you see him talking that often. You probably haven't, because he doesn't. It's very hard for central bankers to give interviews, and they're not really supposed to. So we thought we had really lucked out, because after lots and lots of calls and lots of work, we sat down with the chief economist of the European Central Bank, and we're like, "Are you going to rescue Europe? What's the deal?"
Our problem was banking liquidity. And for that, you don't need quantitative easing. For that, you need what we call fixed rate full allotment.
Do you mean that the banks were low on cash?
What the banks didn't do is exchanging surpluses and deficits anymore.
Yeah, that's what we call in radio horrible tape.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. I can barely understand what the guy's saying, and I've spent a lot of time reading about this. The term full rate allotment, that's going to mean nothing to people. So that tape, we didn't use it anywhere. So we're looking around and we're saying, how can we explain what the ECB's mission is, the European Central Bank? How can we explain their fear of inflation, which is so rooted in the German psyche as the central bank is? And we found this gem, which was a cartoon on the ECB's website.
I don't believe it. He keeps on putting his prices up.
We'll never be able to buy anything here.
Well then, you'd better have more money.
Wait a second. I know you. You're inflation.
Well done.
We found this and we said, okay, this is great because the ECB has this on their website. Yes, it's supposed to teach children and younger people, but it totally works because it really helps you understand the fact that they would depict this economic concept in a way in the form of a monster shows you how much it is of their mind, as opposed to what the ECB usually says about inflation, which is our goal is price stability in the medium term. Right. This is something that, you guys laughed, which is exactly what we were hoping to do.
You have to listen. Like that, you'll listen to that, but you won't listen to the other guy. The next thing was kind of a similar situation. Like we had to talk to the people that were gonna make the decision about the bailout in Germany. So we spent a day at the Reichstag and we talked to all these people, all these politicians, whatever. Like nobody cares about European politics. Like it's a parliamentary system half the time. There's like 6 different parties. I now sort of know the difference between the 6 parties, but there's no way that I can convey it to you guys. And why would you really want to know? Like it's hard enough to follow what's going on in Congress. So what we did was we just had Germans frame the debate for us. We ditched all the tape we had from the politicians, and we just had people talk about what mattered to them.
Because it was a very real question whether the German parliament was going to vote, should we go ahead, should we help out the other countries, what kind of action should we take? Right. And so we needed to see how people on the street felt about it. So we turned to our old friend Klaus, who you heard at the beginning, talking about soccer and monetary stability, and he framed one side of the debate for us.
Mm-hmm. Germany's economic revival came with a price. And we look around and say, what has Italy done? Answer, nothing. What has Spain done? Enjoy the party. What has Greece done? Deliberately reduced its competitiveness, deliberately inflated the public sector. What has Portugal done? Ruin. And Ireland and the rest. And then we are called to show solidarity. Who showed solidarity with us?
He's pretty fired up. We had this great moment with him where he took out the Maastricht Treaty, which created the euro in his office, and he's angrily pointing and he's saying, see this clause right here? It says
Article 125.
Yeah, no bailouts, no bailouts. Why are we doing this? And this was the reaction that we expected to get from Germans before we went. We'd read so much, these people are so angry, they look around, they see these people with, outrageous pensions, very late retirement ages, and we've done these things to our economy to make us strong and secure. Why should we bail them out? Why should we help them out? But we kept asking people this question.
And like in America, that's sort of what you expect. Like there's a lot of debate in America about whether the government should be paying for health care. Like we didn't expect that Germans would want to bail out a whole other European country. Like why would we even think that? It just didn't make common sense to us.
So pretty much everywhere we went, we asked people, how do you feel about what's going on? How do you feel about Germany having to be the hero?
At that time, it was Greece was the big issue. Do you guys want to bail out Greece?
One night we were walking around Frankfurt and we were actually on our way to go talk to some other people, but we saw these 2 guys sitting outside a theater smoking cigarettes and we thought, what the heck, we'll ask them what they think.
There is the birth of the theater we are doing here. So, of course, I feel very near to Greece and their culture, and it's, all democracy and Pericles, and we got to help them out. Yeah, why not?
So that was one guy we talked to. We asked our cab drivers.
It's the ending of war and it's the beginning of a new future. Europe. It's a dream for the Europe peoples, for German, for Spain, for French, since more than 100 years. It's a dream.
We went, of course, to the train station.
We had a war behind us, and now we are friends, and also with France. It is so wonderful. You can go without a passport, and you have the same money. It is like we are sisters and brothers. It's wonderful.
And I have to say, this was a really big breakthrough moment for Zoe and I, because the more we asked people this question, the more we got responses like this. We are Europeans. We're one big family now. It's our duty to help each other out. And that was something that going over there, we didn't expect at all.
We thought Germans would want to leave the euro completely and be like, we got our economy in shape and we're doing really well and we don't need you losers. And that's not what we heard. Like, that is not what we heard.
Yeah, over a lot of yes, there are people there who are very angry, like you heard Klaus, but so many people had this reaction. So many people said, it's our responsibility. And it's because, like we said before, in Germany, there's such a sense of history and such a sense of the past and such shame, to be honest, about what happened in their country and what they did to the countries around them, that going into the euro for them was sort of a way of saying, hey. It was
redemptive.
Yeah, it was redemptive. It was a way of saying, hey, we're in this together. We're with you guys. And so now they saw it almost as their moment to shine, as that time for them to stand up and really embrace these other countries and do something good for them.
There is an economic reason. Germany is an export-oriented economy. They have a built-in market with the euro, and there is that. But if you're asking regular Germans how they feel about it, like, that's not how they're framing the question. This was a very emotional question for a lot of Germans, and we reported on that.
As we're thinking about this idea and this feeling that these Germans have of being Europeans, of being together, it started to make us wonder about, you know, the history of the euro and how this all came together in the first place. Because it's kind of an amazing thing to think about all these countries who've had years and years of war and fighting and have done horrible things together suddenly get together and they're like, hey, let's share currency. That's going to be a great idea. Obviously, really good economic reasons to do it, to make them much stronger, but they had to get over so much history to get to that point, to get together. And the two central figures of the coming together of the euro are France and Germany. And the thing about their story that we realized is that it is sort of a love story.
It's like
a very
twisted,
complicated, you know, takes a long time for them to get together, and then Germany is sort of, you know, more into France and France is into Germany, but they need to be together.
I mean, way into France.
Right, so we thought, how can we get that across to people? And this is how we did it.
We need a currency so that we truly are intertwined. So each economy will eventually be combined.
You cannot mean to say that you would take away the mark.
Oui.
But the mark is a symbol of all that is Deutschland über alles.
Exactement. We cannot truly be a union if we are not tied together financially.
And what would we call this currency? It's called the euro. It's safe and strong, very safe and very strong. It's so secure. No, what could go wrong?
So, of course, those are not the voices of
That's
Zoe
not
and I. Those are trained professionals. We have a great guy in our office, Jeff London, who does a lot of arts reporting. He's also a composer and has a partner who's a lyricist. And we sat down and we told him the story. We told him this idea we had about a love story. And he wrote us this beautiful piece of music that worked really well. And, you know,
at the end, it gets really hectic. It's like everyone's waking up with this like hangover, and Germany's trying to leave, and they can't go.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of humor and levity in this, but you know, before we can get to this point, we have to talk to a ton of people, read a bunch of really, really boring economic papers, because to be able to tell the story in song, you have to really understand what the story is before you can have some fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
You guys mentioned a fear of totalitarianism, a fear of the right. I'm wondering if you have any perspective on that fear being valid, about a connection between monetary instability and strongman style government.
Well, you know what's funny is like the problem with the euro is that the countries don't have control over their own monetary policy, like each individual country doesn't. But so in a way, you know, I think that's part of the problem. The countries feel a little bit strangled, right? They can't devalue their currency. They can't make it they don't have control basically over their own thing. It's coming out of Brussels and it's coming out of the European Central Bank. And I think that lack of control is leading to this increased nationalism, and the increased nationalism in Europe is often closely followed by anti-Semitism, and it's very scary. And I think that has to do with a feeling that that people in those countries are having, that they don't have that much control over their own destiny. So it's funny, like, in a way, if the euro, if they weren't in the euro, if they weren't in this really binding treaty, it actually might help assuage some of this extremism that is coming.
Another thing too is that a lot of people, as Zoe mentioned, I think people in a lot of these countries are looking for a strong leader that represents the interests of their country, because they do feel, especially in the case of Germany, and Germany being so tied so closely with the ECB, that the Germans are kind of pushing them around a little bit, that they're coming in saying, no, you have to do austerity, you have to cut back, there's no other choice. And so obviously that's a very, very painful reality if you live in one of these countries. So someone standing up for you and saying, oh no, we're not going to do that, we're not going to let them push you around, I'm going to preserve everything you have, and you're going to get to keep all your benefits, that's what you want to hear.
I spent a lot of time in Europe, in Germany and Spain and a lot of places, and when I wake up each morning and read the New York Times or listen to some programs on NPR, not necessarily yours, I think yours is one of the better ones, you get, at least I got a sense during the Greek bailout and during some of the wrangling that was going on, in the American press, this huge sense of hysteria and crisis that I didn't necessarily feel on the ground. How tough was it for you guys to try to blend what's actually going on, people's actual reaction, versus what perhaps your editors or other people were expecting you to put out there?
That's great. I mean, that's really great. Because we went over there and we thought that too. Like, we thought, oh, the euro might break up. There might be this breakup of the euro. And nobody in Germany felt that way. Not a single person. That's not how the German press was covering it at all. The Euro project, it is practically 100 years old. Like, that ship has sailed. Like, this Euro project is not going away. And that was hard to convey to our editors. And I think that's why we got so attracted to these history stories. We tried to show what a long project this has been. Like, this is, I think to Americans, certainly to me, the euro is 10 years old, and that's not true in Europe at all.
To follow up on that question too, it's really two parts, because if you approach it from the standpoint of Europe, and I was just there 2 months ago, that is how they feel, and there's a lack of appreciation for how long this has been developing. Conversely, there's sort of a lack of appreciation for the timeline in which Americans work. And I overheard a very good analogy from a very senior banker, and he said he was asking a government official the timeline for which they would resolve Greece. And this was in maybe August of 2011. Mm-hmm. And he was expecting a response somewhere in the range of, I would say, weeks. And he said, well, hopefully the holidays.
Yeah.
And he said, do you mean Labor Day? And he said, no, the holidays, like Christmas. And he said, well, that wasn't really the time frame we were predicting. And I think Americans, especially in the context of either default or resolution, frame, and this is especially true within banking, they frame it within the context of the weekend, which was the weekend when one investment bank failed, another was purchased, and an insurance agency was bailed out. So they kind of say to themselves, well, we basically determined what to do with 3 massive institutions costing hundreds of billions of dollars in about 70 hours. Mm-hmm. So what in the world's taking so long?
This sort of angst and resentment is on the German side is something that I've certainly run into with the Germans that I know, which is, I think, is hilarious, considering that the EU was created to keep Germany divided and weak, and now they're in charge of saving it. Is there any understanding on the German side that, by they're being asked now to save Europe, and by doing so they could find themselves in a much stronger position?
Oh, certainly. We talked to, we didn't play any of the tape, but some of the major people we talked to over there were exporters who said, hey, you know who our customers are? Spain, Portugal, Ireland, all these countries around us. If they can't afford to buy our goods anymore, we're gonna go down. You know, Germany is such a powerhouse, and increasingly they're exporting outside the European market, but still the bulk of their business comes from these other countries. They know how closely they're intertwined.
What I'm really reflecting a lot on, sort of listening to you talk about the situation here, is how incapable the politicians seem to be of actually describing this in a way that sort of even the people within Europe who are living this day in, day out are able to sort of understand and process. And it almost seems like you can create an ethical issue there where government is not being transparent about, or perhaps doesn't know how to be transparent about these very important decisions that have a very real impact on people's lives.
I think that's like, the thing is that it's like, it's at odds. Like, it's politically not expedient for the politicians to explain what's economically necessary to do. And that's the problem. They have different incentives.
Yeah, like they're faced with the fact, you know, they have the ECB or whoever it is breathing down their neck saying you have to cut back, you have to cut back, and they may know that the debt that they have in their country is unsustainable. At the same time, they're up for re-election next month, next year, whenever it is, and if they cut all these programs and all these things people love so dearly, they're gonna be in trouble. I mean, you know, we're sort of seeing similar conversations here in the US over our entitlement programs, over Social Security and over Medicare. You know, constantly we're seeing numbers come out. We can't continue to, you know, support these programs, but no one's gonna stand up and say, let's end them. I mean, it's political suicide. So it's a very delicate balance.
For more on this program and other Carnegie Ethics Studio productions, visit carnegiecouncil.org. There you can find video highlights, transcripts, audio recordings, and other multimedia resources on global ethics. This program is made possible by the Carnegie Ethics Studio and viewers like you.